Chapter 4 of Camille. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Rachel Lintern. Camille by Alexandre Dumas Fils. Translated by Edmund Goss. Chapter 4. 2 days after, the sale was ended. It had produced 150,000 francs. The creditors divided among them 2/3, and the family, a sister and a grand-nephew, received the remainder. The sister opened her eyes very wide when the lawyer wrote to her that she had inherited 50,000 francs. The girl had not seen her sister for 6 or 7 years, and did not know what had become of her from the moment when she had disappeared from home. She came up to Paris in haste, and great was the astonishment of those who had known Marguerite when they saw as her only heir a fine fat country girl, who until then had never left her village. She had made the fortune at a single stroke, without even knowing the source of that fortune. She went back, I heard afterward, to her countryside, greatly saddened by her sister's death, but with a sadness that was somewhat lightened by the investment at 4.5%, which she had been able to make. All these circumstances, often repeated in Paris, the mother city of scandal, had begun to be forgotten, and I was even, little by little, forgetting the part I had taken in them, when a new incident brought to my knowledge the whole of Marguerite's life, and acquainted me with such pathetic details that I was taken with the idea of writing down the story which I now write. The rooms, now emptied of all their furniture, had been to let for 3 or 4 days, when one morning there was a ring at my door. My servant, or rather my porter, who acted as my servant, went to the door and brought me a card, saying that the person who had given it to him wished to see me. I glanced at the card, and there read these 2 words: Armand Duval. I tried to think where I had seen the name, and remembered the first leaf of the copy of Manon Lescaut. What could the person who had given the book to Marguerite want of me? I gave orders to ask him in at once. I saw a young man, blonde, tall, pale, dressed in a travelling suit which looked as if he had not changed it for some days, and had not even taken the trouble to brush it on arriving at Paris, for it was covered with dust. Monsieur Duval was deeply agitated. He made no attempt to conceal his agitation, and it was with tears in his eyes and a trembling voice that he said to me: "Sir, I beg you to excuse my visit and my costume, but young people are not very ceremonious with one another, and I was so anxious to see you to-day that I have not even gone to the hotel to which I sent my luggage, and have rushed straight here, fearing that after all I might miss you, early as it is." I begged Monsieur Duval to sit down by the fire. He did so, and taking his handkerchief from his pocket, hid his face in it for a moment. "You must be at a loss to understand," he went on, sighing sadly, "for what purpose an unknown visitor, at such an hour, in such a costume, and in tears, can have come to see you. I have simply come to ask of you a great service." "Speak on, sir. I am entirely at your disposal." "You were present at the sale of Marguerite Gautier." At this word the emotion, which had got the better of him for an instant, was too much for him, and he was obliged to cover his eyes with his hand. "I must seem to you very absurd," he added, "but pardon me, and believe that I shall never forget the patience with which you have listened to me." "Sir," I answered, "if the service which I can render you is able to lessen your trouble a little, Tell me at once what I can do for you, and you will find me only too happy to oblige you." Monsieur Duval's sorrow was sympathetic, and in spite of myself I felt the desire of doing him a kindness. Thereupon he said to me, "You bought something at Marguerite's sale?" "Yes, a book." "Manon Lescaut?" "Precisely." "Have you the book still?" "It is in my bedroom." On hearing this, Armand Duval seemed to be relieved of a great weight, and thanked me as if I had already rendered him a service merely by keeping the book. I got up and went into my room to fetch the book, which I handed to him. "That is it indeed," he said, looking at the inscription on the first page and turning over the leaves. "That is it indeed," and 2 big tears fell on the pages. "Well, sir," he said, lifting his head and no longer trying to hide from me that he had wept, and was even then on the point of weeping, "do you value this book very greatly?" "Why?" "Because I have come to ask you to give it up to me." "Pardon my curiosity, but was it you then who gave it to Marguerite Gautier?" "It was." "The book is yours, sir. Take it back. I am happy to be able to hand it over to you." "But," said Monsieur Duval with some embarrassment, "the least I can do is give you in return the price which you paid for it." "Allow me to offer it to you. The price of a single volume in a sale of that kind is a mere nothing, and I do not remember how much I gave for it." "You gave 100 francs." "True," I said, embarrassed in my turn. "How do you know?" "It is quite simple. I hoped to reach Paris in time for the sale, and I only managed to get here this morning. I was absolutely resolved to have something which had belonged to her. I hastened to the auctioneer and asked him to allow me to see the list of the things sold and of the buyers' names. I saw that this volume had been bought by you, and I decided to ask you to give it up to me, though the price you had set upon it made me fear you might yourself have some souvenir in connection with the possession of the book." As he spoke, it was evident that he was afraid I had known Marguerite as he had known her. I hastened to reassure him. "I knew Mademoiselle Gautier only by sight," I said. "Her death made on me the impression that the death of a pretty woman must always make on a young man who had liked seeing her. I wished to buy something at her sale, and I bid higher and higher for this book out of mere obstinacy, and to annoy someone else who was equally keen to obtain it, and who seemed to defy me on the contest. I repeat, then, that the book is yours, and once more I beg you to accept it. Do not treat me as if I were an auctioneer, and let it be the pledge between us of a longer and more intimate acquaintance." "Good," said Armand, holding out his hand and pressing mine. "I accept, and I shall be grateful to you all my life." I was very anxious to question Armand on the subject of Marguerite, for the inscription in the book, the young man's hurried journey, his desire to possess the volume, piqued my curiosity. But I feared if I questioned my visitor that I might seem to have refused his money only in order to have the right to pry into his affairs. It was as if he guessed my desire, for he said to me, "Have you read the volume?" "All through." "What did you think of the 2 lines that I wrote in it?" I realized at once that the woman to whom you had given the volume must have been quite outside the ordinary category, for I could not take those 2 lines as a mere empty compliment. You were right. That woman was an angel. See, read this letter." And he handed to me a paper which seemed to have been many times reread. I opened it. and this is what it contained: "My dear Armand,